Hello and welcome back to Hikmatology. It's getting into spring now, so lovely in the background, nice days. We have our uh, Hamza from previous videos and our special guest, Qasim. So would you like to introduce yourself, Qasim?
Hi there. I'm Qasim, and I've known Hamza for like a very long time now at this point. And I'm a student in Brock business. I'm studying business. I live in Canada, and I've just graduated. And I only care about philosophy and theology. And even though I'm a business student, this is something I care a lot about. I've put in a lot of time thinking about these topics, and just a good opportunity to discuss with you. Some things that we could talk about on call, me and Hamza, and we decided to share our insights or just bounce our ideas basically to test how much truth lies in it, you
Hmm,
know?
cool. Business and theology. Wow,
Yeah.
two very different
Yeah.
things.
Yes.
Okay, so we were briefly discussing about language. So if you want to go back to what you were saying about language and how we kind of live in language and it shapes our reality, is that right?
Yes. Yes.
So we were
Um,
also liking that with like Adam and Eve and the names. So if you want to go into like your idea and also a question about Adam and Eve and how it links with how we started to use language and how it shaped us as human beings.
exactly how the knowledge that was given to us at that period of existence, if that story is even true, that is a metaphor, and that's also up to debate. But just thinking about it as if that specific, it just gives us an insight of how reality was before and how what happened after that, and we gained consciousness and we started to view reality through languages, through ideas, through information, through knowledge, and through good and bad. I think all of this is kind of mentioned in a hidden way in the whole story of the Garden of Eden. So let's just dissect it
Yeah.
as
What do you
well.
think, Hamza?
No, I'm very curious to listen at this point.
Or like your
I wanna,
contribution, like as
I'll,
in
I'll contribute. I'll contribute. Before I just wanna get more about this topic from your perspective, or Qasim. Yeah. So then I can write down my questions.
yeah. So I think part of what you're saying, Custom, was that almost as if language was, like is it also like what was Adam was there, and then the idea of language was put into him at the creation, or what's the idea in the Quran about? Because this is like with the idea of being taught all the names, isn't it?
Yes, yes, teaching all the names of everything. So if I look at the world outside, right, I don't view it as it is. I view it through languages. Even if I look at myself in a mirror, I look at it on that's a human. That's a human nose, mouth, face. All these are words that were taught to me. Even when I grow up as a human being, I live a life. This information is transferred to me by my family, by my culture, the place I grew up at, and even the ideas of good and bad are being transferred to me through them. I'm just when you look at the story of the Garden of Eden as well, like besides just God giving Adam the names of everything, it's just that the fruit itself was the fruit of knowledge, right? Um, Muslims disagree on this specific topic. They think it's different, but I've read in Bible specifically that was the fruit of knowledge that Adam took, and basically the Satan told Adam or Eve that with by taking this fruit of knowledge, you will gain the wisdom of God. So that was the motivation behind it for Eden, and Eden basically persuaded Adam to take the fruit of knowledge, and then Adam took it, and after that, both of them didn't even, before that they didn't even realize that they were naked, or they didn't even realize that they were in a they were basically innocent before that, and this is my interpretation of it. And then after taking that fruit, they realized they're human beings and they have no clothes on, and they started to feel, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That entire shift happened after they took the fruit, and that obviously that fruit itself is really important in the, if you think about it, like before that we were not introspective of who we are as human beings, and after that we could see ourselves in through a different light of a separation sort of a sense. Before that we were innocent, like a child, essentially.
Yeah, definitely what you were saying about. Sorry, Hamza.
No, go on.
So,
If I can add something, just a very short note. The story that how I came across this story is a bit different than this incident. All these things were not at the Garden of Eden, but Alam Ashra, which is like on the sky, let's say, where Allah blew the soul inside Adam. So it wasn't inside Eden or heaven. And this is where he introduced him to all the other souls, that all the other creations and all the prophets, and even like scholars say that introduced each one of his children to him. And that's where he was taught the knowledge. And then Allah told him he can have the whole Jannah except that one particular food. The food itself is not the food of knowledge or anything, but it's just like anything that Allah chose. Okay, you have everything except don't do this, So the fruit itself is not of a very high value or like hides some knowledge or something. It's just any ordinary thing that Allah restricted. Could have been anything. It doesn't matter which fruit it was. Was it an apple? Was it whatever? And disobeying what Allah told him not to do, that brought that shift. Regardless, they say Adam wasn't punished. It was already destined that human civilization will be living on this planet and will be tested for their deeds and everything. But but what Qasim is saying, I totally understand. It's a total different topic.
Yeah, it's in the Bible.
It's about
very different.
But also like where you took it, like the other dimension and the realization and the understanding that we are human. That's a very different topic than what I was shedding the light on, but that's what I've learned so far about this story, Alam Ashra, they call it, I guess.
you're talking about the world of souls is where this would have happened then, sort of out with maybe like not the universe as we know it, but as an ideas about Earth and the heavens. It's out with that. It's like when before material creation of Adam, these things happened.
So there's another story. I don't know if it's in Quran, but what I know is like Allah created Adam in the skies, not in Jannah. And this event where he was given soul and where Amma Hawa, his wife, was given soul, and where all the angels were, that was in the skies, which is not the dimension exactly of Garden of Eden. Or so after that they were sent to Eden. Now, wallahu alam.
Yeah. So I'll throw in some things then, okay? So what you were saying, Cos, at the initial thing about how we view the world through language is, you could say we can't. Our consciousness is almost linked to language, isn't it? We think in language, and it's interesting that language is so important that depending on what language you speak, it's like alters how you think.
Yeah.
Well, it's natural, isn't it? Because some languages have certain concepts that are not present in other languages. So if you're exposed to those concepts, it's going to make you think differently than someone who isn't exposed to those concepts through their language. So we can, and it's how we view ourselves, how we view the world, how we interact with each other is through language.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll put through a few things and then we can go back and see what you guys think. You touched on very briefly, it was almost like a little brushstroke, I went right past it, about the idea of the Eden story and Adam and Eve as being a metaphor. So I would have taken that and put a pin right on that and be like, that's where it is. That's the whole pivot.
That's something I'm interested in too.
Yeah. So before going into that, some scholars, Muslim, some non-Muslim, have said that, religions and religious people get themselves into a bit of a pickle when they look at religion and religious scriptures literally. And that's where a lot of things, like, become an issue. Not understanding that the Quran is like any ancient book or any spiritual guide or book. It has different sort of techniques or skills in its back pocket, and it keeps using them. Metaphor is one of them, allegory is one of them, parable is one of them, and it even says, the Quran itself, it even says, we give forth a parable. So it says within itself that it uses different literary techniques to get over a point, a message. So I was reading something 2 days ago, and one scholar, he looked at Adam and Eve story, Eden, and Cain and Abel, and he said that actually these seem to form like a block that's separate from the rest of the Bible. And it's almost as if they fit within the realm of, a lot of people don't like this wording, but they fall within the realm of mythology. Now, a lot of people think, well, what you're saying then is that the story is not true, therefore, you're saying the Quran's a lie. The thing is, it doesn't matter. The point of the story being true isn't what's important. Yeah. What's important is, like you're saying, is the message, what it can teach us about human development, what it can teach us about what actually is a human being is the most important. And then also about, maybe the consequences of doing bad things. So there's lots of, if you start to look at it as a metaphor or as an allegory, or I think actually a better wording is myth, actually it becomes more useful because it becomes more true than if you look at it as a historic fact. So going back to language, so saying that Adam was taught all the names. So what Hamza was saying is that Adam was taught all the names. So some scholars, and I'm guessing these are Muslim scholars, have said, well, that's the names of all the people that have come, up until the very last of the day. I think the problem with that is that they're taking it a bit too literally. That they're saying that because it means the names, it's like names of people. I don't really think that's what the Quran is saying. There's a translation that I use a lot, and a commentary I use a lot, Muhammad Asad. And he says that, names is like a word. So when you put a word onto something, automatically you separate it from other things. And when Allah is describing the names that Adam was taught, it's referring to the human being's ability to have conceptual thinking that is sort of lacking in like animals, for example. We think in a certain way, and we, have a way of knowing things. And also to know something is to name it. You know something first through naming it. But it's all to do with this idea of humans being able to conceptually think, to put things into different categories and think of the world in that way. And it is as if the Quran is saying that one part of what a human being is this ability to live in language, to live in words, or names, as the Quran puts it. So that's what I was saying. That's where the idea of it becoming a myth is talking about something grander than a historic fact. It's talking about something, it's more important than talking about, well, this happened, 50 million years ago in some garden somewhere, and this man ate that. That's not the point. The point is saying what is about human evolution. And then the scholars were saying that mostly, I think there were Christian scholars were saying that Cain and Abel is actually relating to a further development of humanity, where Cain and Abel respectively represented human beings were moving from the hunter-gatherer into the more sedentary farm lifestyle, and there's the conflict. And then the conflict of Cain and Abel. So, but you have to kind of separate them and look at them as myth. That's how I would look at it. Of that, it's sort of relating to what you're saying about language, but also looking at it from what is the story of Eden is like a myth, but exposing more truth because of it being myth rather than being any lesser of a story.
Yeah. I think you're right. We put emphasis on truth as if like if it's fact, if it's noted down, it's truth. But truth comes in very different shapes and sizes. And in my opinion, yes, myth is a truth, but it's a very different type of truth.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I agree with you on that. And I also think like how should I say it? Do you want to add something, Hamza, to like recollect my thoughts?
No, I totally agree. There is one verse that was coming in my head while we were talking about the name. And one very important thing, I'll come to the verse after. When you said like the one way of knowing for us is to name it. And that's so beautifully put that, you know, any ideas or like, let's say, capitalism or whatever we try to even understand, we name it. Once we have understood it to a certain extent, we give it a name. So it's not just limited to people or things, it's ideas and everything else, it gets named. And even Islam itself is a name of a very big thing, you know. And this language part, the large language model that we have been given, LLM, which gives me this idea, the verse in Surah Rahman, the 4th verse, Allamahul Bayan, is Allah taught us how to speak. This is super important, I guess, because it shows that this ability, this whole thing that we have is only by Allah that we have been given. No other creation except the one we have now turned AI into thing which can talk. But this is something which is very, very special ability. It's like it's a miracle in itself that we can, even now this conversation is just happening because we have this ability to talk. So yeah, this is just what I wanted to add.
Yeah.
And I understood completely what you're saying.
I have another thing to add. So basically what we're saying that what was before the names? Before God taught humans, like specifically Adam, the names, or before we were able to make sense of reality through languages, through ideas, or maybe we had, you can say, consciousness or self-realization in a sense that we are a separate entity. Before that, I think this is just my interpretation of it, that we didn't have that sense of separateness from the eternal. That separateness came after. Even you can say it was not present at the time of hunter-gatherers. We didn't feel like we were separate. I don't know when this conscious shift happened. Some people say it was because of the mushrooms. Some people say, but there's different theories of when this realization of that we started to think about our thoughts. We started to reflect on ourselves, and I think that fruit was representing that. What do you think about it? That fruit represents that shift in human consciousness, where it starts to consider itself as a separate entity from the eternal.
What was, I think it is relating to some sort of knowledge, and I'm trying in my mind to think if it's not also relating to the knowledge of good and evil. I have something at the back of my mind that and I think these are all connected, the fruits, or rather the tree, and also like the idea of like you said, the human beings becoming aware of their, again, quote unquote, nakedness. So
yes,
you know, it goes. It's almost as if it's. I don't know if I agree with evolution per se. Like I think it's sort of onto something, but not maybe on the right foundation. Somehow there has to be some truth to it, but I don't know if I didn't say it's like a common ancestor. So like, you know, evolutionists say it's not about you have like your hunched ape or whatever, and it gradually, you know, you see the map and it gradually comes more erect and then it becomes like the human being. So that's actually misrepresentation of evolution. What it actually says is that it's actually like more like a branch, and there's like a common ancestor that we share. So I don't know. I don't know. I mean, Darwin wasn't the first one to come up with it. Even at the time, he wasn't the only one to come up with it. There was actually Muslim thinkers that had similar ideas. Al-Jahiz was one of them in the Golden Era, who had actually ideas of evolution. It goes back to even the ancient Greeks. So if we want to say that there is, this maybe, this whole Adam and Eve, the fruit, it's related to something relating to evolution from a sort of, like you mentioned the word, did you say the word innocent? Something like that you said.
Yeah, I'm saying like...
we say that animals are innocent. There's a certain awareness that they don't have. And no animal from cradle to the grave wears clothes. Because they're not aware of, they don't have that shame. We are the only animal that has it. Right? So there's a certain consciousness that we have. It's like almost like somehow like a veil was lifted from our eyes, and we got like this new consciousness, and that's the nakedness that we had to cover up. With our sorts,
Yes.
I also see the food thing.
Yeah, go ahead, Ramza.
I also see the food thing is, in my very personal opinion, that maybe it's more to. It's like when it's a direct disobedience in a way as well. When Allah told Adam not to do a particular thing, and he did that, it shows that biting itself is the realization of being human. Even if Allah has told you not to do something, but you're human, and this is the realization when you do something, you kind of realize that, you keep on doing stuff which you're even told not to do, or like which is harmful to you or whatever. It's not about that Adam made a mistake, but we human, as human species or the animal itself, is
the original sin. That's what they call it.
Yes, like it's a built-in thing. And this is the realization of self as well, what we are. We would make mistakes, and this is one thing that will happen over and over and over again in our life. I think it's a very beautiful thing that our story begins with this, because sometimes we go very hard on our own selves when we do mistakes, or we do things that even we don't want to do, and we end up doing them. So this is very human, I think. And if the story of human begins with this, it's, I think, very beautiful to acknowledge that this is very human,
Yeah, finally about original sin. Obviously, that wasn't from the Bible. That's from Saint Augustine, who came up with their idea of original sin. The idea that because this happened, again, it's because they took it literally that this literal person did this, so that the guilt was passed through all of Adam's descendants, and everyone's born in sin. Whereas, again, I think it comes back to like they took it again literally, but that idea of original sin and it being passed is luckily something that's not in the Quran. It's not actually even like I said, in the Bible either. It's a concept that luckily Muslims have not fallen into, because it is just. It's not. It's like Hamza was saying. Sinning is part of being human, and you can. It's
avoid it,
avoid it, and you could say that the whole point is like what the story of mankind begins with an act of disobedience. Again, you could say it wasn't. Again, it didn't really happen. It's there as a. It's there as an example that if you're going to talk about human beings, you're going to talk about a species that's always going to fall. But the best people are those who bring themselves back up again. So it's also important that it always makes. That's why going back to the original point, it always makes more sense to look at it as a myth, in the realm of myth, rather than historic fact, because the lessons that you get from it are so much more interesting, actually, to be honest. It's kind of boring if you look at it as a story and this happened and there's two people eating this fruit and they fell down the sky. That's kind of boring, actually. But if you look at it as a myth and all the philosophy that you can get from it, there's more depth, but also it links with the overall message of the Quran as well, and it kind of helps you navigate the world of science as well, where it doesn't really seem like we necessarily started from one couple. It's a bit messier than that.
Yeah.
But what you were saying about when it happened, you're saying it was maybe even after the hunter-gatherer. So it's like, trying to, even scientists now, trying to pinpoint that time when Homo sapiens really, really began. Because there's a time when it's like, you have like these Neanderthals and also, like they're trying to think what actually gave birth to the Homo sapiens and like what we are, like modern humans. They're saying it's like, an ancestor and it mated with a Neanderthal and maybe that's what. So no one really knows. But it does seem to be that before then there was a certain consciousness that was still innocent. It wasn't fully developed. And then it became fully developed as the human being as what we know, modern humans. I think that's when you could say the apple was eaten. And that full awareness, maybe not knowledge, but awareness came about. I think that's what the Quran's talking about.
Even just one second.
Sheikh, very interesting ideas, by the way.
Yeah, that was just one second, guys.
What do you think, Hamza?
I really like this way of looking at it as a myth now. Not just like a myth, but like philosophical approach towards, because somehow then it doesn't stick to blindly following. Because if you just believe that this is a story and this is what happened, blah, 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 you're just like memorizing stories and accepting them, but not unpacking the ideas behind them is very important to see them from different. And there could be many other ways to see this as well. Like this is one approach. But yeah, it's important, I guess, to always try to see what you said about Khizr. I was talking to Qasim about it as well. Like the story itself is more important.
That's another program.
Yeah, sure.
That's a case for another time. But yeah,
Qasim, you have to add something.
Yeah, any kind of final thoughts on language and Adam and Eve fruit?
I was just thinking about that. First of all, I think if we, like, for example, it is if you think of it as a myth, it's much easier to be in that position, because if you put it as a fact, it's so hard to prove all the time, like you're right. And that in itself is exhausting. And I think also, if for any intelligent human being, you should be able to keep two ideas, conflicting ideas, and try to like measure them. And that's the way you get closer to what's actually true. And also, I think when you think about good and evil, from the perspective of that, act or sin, if you want to even call it that, there's no good and evil, because technically that, for me, that act in itself was preordained and destined. Like Hamza said before, it was supposed to happen. God knows about it, and it's a game that has already been written before. So technically, what good and evil is something how we project like our perspective on it and how we are viewing it, because our perspective is very small. It's only probably like 70 years or so. But if you look at from a galactic or universal perspective, where God is viewing it, that act was not evil. And even beyond that, I think language is not something that animals use. Language is something we use. And it's interesting, my aunt was saying the other day, it's just a theory of hers, but she was saying that we use language as a way because we are trying to hide something from each other. Because at one point, language didn't exist between humans to communicate. But now we have to hide something. There's certain things that I want to hide about myself from you. So I'm going to use language to convey. Otherwise, if I don't use language, if I'm like telepathically trying to communicate with someone, there would be no barrier, and all like I can't lie at that point. So language is also like a barrier that we use to to communicate with each other, and probably it existed after the original sin. They're just like speculations and my own.
But it's very interesting.
Ideas.
Like if you can imagine the language of before the garden story,
Yes,
it
yes,
could have been a different dimension, and that could have been a very transparent, let's say. But this is also, I guess, very important that we have language as a medium of keeping ourselves private, let's say, because Allah loves to cover sins, and Allah loves to
Mhm.
keep everyone have their dignity, let's say.
Mhm.
And this is, I guess, very important that every human should be able to have it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if we go beyond sins and if we go beyond all that, maybe we would come back to
Yeah, it could be. That's
like-
maybe the dimension of afterlife, let's say,
yeah.
There's a
And so
couple of, there's a little segment, right? Rumi. So I don't know how much Rumi, like
Yeah.
those are attributed to Rumi are actually from Rumi. So I don't know what poem this is actually from. But I'll end on this. Is that okay? I'll end this because that's very interesting. So, and this might actually be following on to something like to the next one, if that's okay, about good and evil. So